Well, welcome again to GPS. We thank you for finding us. We don't know if you're looking for us every week or you're just watching LLBN all the time and we just come on. Either way, we're glad that you're with us. God's prophetic surprise on the book of Revelation. So Dr. Jon and Pastor Sara and I'm Pastor Dan. We just love to have you get a Bible out and we're ready to go. We're on the 7 seals. And as usual, we're taking 1 or 2 shows per seal. So we'll see if we can move through some of the 7 seals, what they call the 4 horsemen, some today. But I got one, going back to another question. I was driving home the other day after we did the show and was pondering Revelation 7. So just bear with me. This is all in love and anxious to understand. And I'm really happy if it turns out that you're right, that Revelation 6, the first horse, is positive, and it's a white horse of conquering for Jesus.
Well, I tipped you off about Revelation 7, so you owe it to me.
Okay. So just bear with me, one more question. Because in Revelation 7, we have the 4 winds and the 4 angels holding back the winds. And so we have the letting go, and when you let go, evil happens. And so it seems, so with that side of it, that when God lets go, the Romans 1 idea, that God lets evil go, that the 4 together do evil. And it says, do not harm the land or the sea and so on until we do the sealing. So the 4 winds and the 4 angels all seem to have to do with harming as a group. Is that an argument for all the 4 being consistently seen as all doing evil? Or do you have an answer for that?
Oh, yes, that is an argument. And when you're dealing with material like the book of Revelation, you're often dealing in probabilities. You know, for example, when it comes to the 7 trumpets, people ask, do I think that I have the right view? I say, I'm about 70% confident. You know, with the seals, I think it's more like 90, 95, but I recognize you can make arguments in different ways. What compels me is when you dig into the 1st and 2nd horses, there's so much gospel material in there. And the interesting thing is horses 1 and 2 go out. The Greek words are there to support that. They go out. When they're called, they go out. But horses 3 and 4 don't. And horses 3 and 4 kind of sound like the final disaster. So the final disaster is held back. And the full consequences of rejecting the gospel are not worked out on the rejectors. But God allows time for people to change their minds, time to repent, time to go another direction. But in the end, Jesus says that when judgment time comes, you condemn yourself. You know, John 12:48, the decisions that you made when the gospel is presented to you, that's what will stand against you in the judgment. I might as well even look at that because I think your question's a helpful one, and I think I definitely respect that position because it does have logic to it.
It has some textual support.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where are we going?
John 12:48 is the text I was referring to. We might as well actually look at it, because it is related also, I think, to the 2nd seal. He who rejects me, this is Jesus speaking, he who rejects me and does not receive my sayings has one who judges him. Now you're right away thinking that's God or Jesus. You know. Who's the one that judges him? He says, the word I spoke is what will judge him at the last day. So you see, the final fate of the wicked is assessed in relation to the gospel. So when the gospel no longer protects, that's when the 4 winds go out. So I think in a gospel context, that makes sense. Because the gospel is really what restrains the full force of evil. If it weren't for the gospel, we'd all be dead. But on account of God's grace and the work of Jesus Christ, we do survive, we have options, our life continues. Every moment that we're alive is a gift of God. You know, I discovered that when I was 44. I drowned in the Pacific Ocean and was rescued in a way that some think was miraculous. When I hit the beach, I knew only one thing. Every day is a gift. Every day is a gift. And we owe the gospel our lives. So in the end, when people have set themselves against Christ and against the gospel, they have chosen not to have that protecting aura over them, and then boom, you know, the final winds of strife go. So yes, I think that's an interesting argument. I think it can be incorporated into a gospel approach.
Okay.
Because the exegesis of the first two horses compels me so much.
Good argument about the number of white references being positive.
For example, yeah. But even in the second, strong gospel references, some of which I didn't get to last time.
So let's go back now to the second trumpet, to second seal, and read it again, and then see where else you want to go. And we talked off camera a little bit. We were trying to maybe spend a little bit of time, you know, because these sound like they're coming from God. You know, God is sending angels. God is sending things. Does God do these seals? Anyway, chapter 6, starting with verse 3. When the Lamb opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make men slay each other. To him was given a large sword. Just a small note, not hugely important, but one commentary that I was reading said that, you know, we asked the other day, is there, are these two the same, the conquest and war here? And they suggested that the conquest was conquest from without, and this could be violence inside, because it's slaying each other. And so they're trying to distinguish between the two there. That would be an argument for keeping the four all evil, but it's separating conquest from without. Anyway, it's not
inside what?
Didn't discuss that.
Okay, because I think that's significant. I mean, there's clearly some sort of civil war going on there, but it's a civil war in what context, what nation, what body, what, you know. And I would argue that this is referring to those who profess the name of Jesus. Among those who profess the name of Jesus, there are acceptors and rejectors of the gospel.
And could that be violence then inside the faith?
It would be division. In fact, you could argue both ways. You could say this is division, because it says they slay one another, take peace away, they slay one another. So there's civil war language here. Or it could be persecution. But that works even within a church context, because we know that the greatest persecutor of all time happened to be a Christian body 1,000 years ago.
Yes.
So,
well, even from Acts 20, it says, wolves will arise from among you.
Yeah.
You know, so there will be this kind of heretical persecution inside. Okay. So do you want to go to the issue about God and violence now, or you want to go some other places first?
Let me point out a couple things. First of all, as you noted, living creatures are the ones who are sort of holding these horses. And the first living creature is the lion. And it's interesting, it says in verse 1 that the first living creature has a voice like thunder. Well, the eagle doesn't have a voice like thunder. I don't have a voice like thunder, and a cow doesn't have a voice like thunder. So this must be the lion. And then the second one, the second living creature, looked like a calf. Here you have, interestingly, sacrificial language. It says he has a great sword. Now, the Greek language has two words for sword. You have rhomphaia, which is the battle sword, which is a big old thing, you know, you carry, you're on a horse, you know, and you need a great radius in order to do the damage. There's a smaller sword that is used in sacrifice. And so this is the sacrificial sword, machaira, it's called in the Greek.
Just slit the throat of the lamb.
This is the sacrificial sword. So you have the calf, you have the sacrificial sword, you have language of slaughter, the slaying one another is sacrificial language. There's different words for killing in the Greek. This is the one used with sacrifice very frequently. So you have sacrificial language, which fits, again, a gospel type of motif. And what I think maybe we don't share that much, because it's maybe not politically correct, but the New Testament gospel is a great divider. And let me show you one other text besides ones we've already looked at previously. 2 Corinthians chapter 2 and verses 14 to 16. And I'll be interested in Sarah's reaction, because I think in today's generation we tend to appreciate the positive side of the gospel, and this might be more of a turnoff. So I'll be interested in how that plays. It says, the natural man does not accept, oh, I'm in 1 Corinthians, my bad. All right.
It was a good passage, but not the right one.
That's a good one, but not what we're looking for. Yeah, 2 Corinthians 2:14. Thanks be to God who always leads us in his triumph in Christ and manifests through us the sweet aroma of the knowledge of him in every place. Mm-hmm. So that's the positive side of the gospel. It's like a sweet aroma. You know, I was walking down Wall Street one day, and nearby there was one of these little side streets that hardly wide enough for a car to go through. And I was with a blind friend, and all of a sudden he said, oh, what's that? You know, his head was going back and forth. He was trying to figure. Your dad would know him, Sarah. His name was Don. And he smelled a perfume. Somebody had a perfume store and was pumping some perfume out into the street. He picked it up right away.
That's so cool.
It was wonderful. And we both went in and bought a bunch of stuff, so it worked. So the gospel, wherever those who present the gospel go, there's a sweet aroma. There's something beautiful about it. For, verse 15, we are a fragrance of Christ to God among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing. But now get this, to the one an aroma from death to death, to the other an aroma from life to life. And who's adequate for these things? So the same gospel smells beautiful to one person and is the stench of death to another. So what kind of gospel is this?
Bill Hybels tells a story of witnessing to a guy. They would go windsurfing in Lake Michigan. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's the pastor of Willow Creek. And go windsurfing for 9 years. Every time there was a big storm, they would try to get out there and go windsurfing. And then he would take him to a coffee shop and try to give him Jesus. After 9 years, he finally said to him, why haven't you accepted? And he said, go over it one more time. So Hybels gives it the best he's got. And he gives a little summary of it. And the guy shakes his head and says, boy, I wish it was true. It is true. No. Walks out. And while Bill is paying the bill, another guy walks around the booth and he says, I couldn't help but hear it. Could I accept it? The same message,
yeah.
Word for word.
Yeah.
Two different people with different reactions to it. One walks out and it's not going to work for him. Can't do it. Too good. The other one says, I need that. Let me take it.
But I think it's how we present it too. This is one of the things I've noticed, I think the most, especially when I was a clinical chaplain, was it's the words you use. There are turnoff words to different people, and if you're aware of what kind of people they are, you know what words to use. So like for my friends that are sick of hearing, I'll pray for you, I never say like, oh guys, I'll pray for you, you know, like keeping you in my thoughts. I'll say, I will keep you in my thoughts and send you good energy.
You have a little booklet you can give all of us so we will know for each one which one to do?
It's observance.
But here's the interesting thing. It was the same presentation of the gospel that affected two people listening at the same time.
Right, but maybe the guy had really toxic experiences with that story, and so no matter how many times you present it to him, he's going to always react the same, saying like, that's not...
Do you think another set of words, another set of metaphors might have worked with the other guy? There's always that chance.
There's always that chance, yes. Because I've heard, I mean, there's been so many times where like I do the same exact thing as another person or a pastor, but I just use different words, and they're like, oh, see, that makes sense. I'm like, that's exactly what this is saying. Like, these are the same things, and they're like, well, it's never been explained this way. And so I think people just miss pieces of it because it doesn't fit in their brain. It's not like who they are.
That's a challenge. I heard Bruce Larson say one time, every crowd, half of the audience needs to hear the opposite sermon of what you're giving.
Yeah.
Half of the people they're desperate and they're struggling and they don't need any more law or any more judgment. They just need grace.
Yeah.
Another group has heard so much grace they need a little inspiration and exhortation, which is why every New Testament letter has half of one and half of the other, because you need both. And if you don't get people back for the next sermon, then
Yeah.
they're going to walk out and just didn't get it.
Well, and this is where I think the one-on-one relationships are so important, and I think sometimes our church doesn't do as well at that because we're really good at the mass presentation. And here's all the information.
efficient.
Circle this answer, you're going to be saved, right? But that doesn't work when there's no relationship involved and you don't hear the individual questions. And so when we hear these things, we may be like, I hear your point and I hear your point, but until they can actually process it out with someone, they're not going to go any deeper than that. That's the end of the conversation then for them.
I think everything you said is exactly right. But we also have to say sometimes the words are perfect. Jesus' words were perfect. He was dialed in to everybody perfectly.
Yeah.
And still the rich young ruler walks away.
Yeah.
And it becomes the smell of death. And he gave a wonderful gospel. And the guy says, I can't do it. And walks away. And it's painful to the one giving, you know. And God says, he's not rejecting you. He's rejecting me at all. So I think it's still true that the gospel is a sword.
That is such a good point, Sarah. And it just illustrates to me why it's so important that we have you here on this program. Because so many talk shows, you know, religious-based talk shows are people all the same age or even all a bunch of men or something talking to each other. But people do respond differently, and the same gospel is not going to hit the same with everyone. So I think that was
So if
extremely...
you'll cover all the women and all the people under 35 or 40,
Nope.
that would just be on you.
I will never be the one that speaks for everyone. Let's be clear on this.
You know what the irony is, though? The irony that you would come up with this point right now is that in 1 Corinthians, Paul states the case. I have become all things to all people. To the Jew I become like a Jew. To those under the law I become like under the law. To those who are weak I become weak. He states that principle, and the first 2 chapters of 2 Corinthians are him defending himself about being wishy-washy. The Corinthians say, we don't know who you are.
Yep.
You know, you're this one day and you're that one day and so forth. And it's one of the greatest challenges that I have found in presenting the gospel, because in the old days, I could just assess my audience and then say, okay, let me take this approach. Today, with the internet, whatever you do for one, you're doing for everybody, and you're turning off people as fast as you're turning them on. And it's really a struggle. It's difficult.
Well, and they can use your own words against you way more now because everything is documented, whereas when you're, you know, back in the day, you didn't. Anyways, it's crazy.
But it's just ironic that in that very context, it was a battle over a great apostle, second best after Jesus at telling the gospel, and he too had a lot of opposition, even inside the church.
Yeah.
So,
And sometimes we have to soothe ourselves with that. I beat myself because I want to win everybody.
Right.
The gospel's so good. How can you pass this up? I mean, I sat with a young Chinese guy yesterday, and I just poured out my heart to him. He's just a great kid. I mean, he's a terrific kid. But he didn't give a prayer of faith, you know, when we were done, you know, and you just say, could I have said it better? Could I have somehow loved him more, done something more? And maybe he will still.
Well, that's what I was going to say is I think we are so hard on ourselves because we want the decision at that moment where, like, we were raised in this system. We had our entire childhood and high school careers to figure out where we stand with our belief systems, and then we made our decisions. We're walking up to these people and sometimes within 3 days expect them to revolutionize their own world.
1 hour
and, like,
lunch, not enough?
Right? And like I think that's kind of unfair. Like we get really frustrated with this next generation where a lot of them haven't had that in-depth experience where we're missionary kids. You're basically a missionary kid. You've been everywhere in the world. And we've had all these experiences outside of our bubbles, and those help us determine what we believe in. Whereas these other people, they've had the most shallow experiences. I'm working with teenagers that don't know basic Bible stories.
that's right.
They have no concept of that. So me to be like, are you getting baptized because you're 13 now? That's a stupid question because they have no idea. They know that they go to church on this day with their parents. They know like the top 5 Bible stories, and then they know that theoretically they need to be baptized in order to be saved or whatever that means.
So it's an argument to learn to listen well before we shoot off our mouth too much.
Well, and I also think we're just really hard on ourselves as pastors. I think that we mess ourselves up because we think that everyone needs to make this one decision where maybe they are still back here and they just need to hear hope, or maybe they just need to hear that there is something bigger to the story that they've heard.
Heard of what they call receptivity scale? Are you familiar with that?
No, you're so much wiser than me.
No, it's an old thing. If you have -10 to +10, so -10 would be total atheism, no faith, nothing. +10 is totally committed to God in every way. 0 is conversion point. And he just said, sometimes all you're going to do is move people a couple notches. Maybe you're going to help break up some of the hard ground, and all of a sudden, boy, maybe Christians aren't complete jerks anymore. You know, they are nice. And you go from -4 to -2, and you've done something for God. You've moved people down the line. And the next person is going to be the one to have the glory of moving them from -1 to 1 and give them the gospel.
Right.
But you prepared the way over here.
Yep.
John the Baptist ends up in jail, and he was the one who prepared the way for Jesus. He doesn't get the gospel. He doesn't have a book of the Bible named for him. He prepared the way, and then Jesus does it.
Yep.
So I have to soothe myself with that. We always want to go over the line. Anyways,
Let me get back to the text here, though.
Yes.
Because you know, you're asking legitimately the question. You know, where's the gospel here? How does this all fit? And when you're doing exegesis, it's not just what the text says, but what the text didn't say. In other words, why does he do it this way and not some other way? If his primary point here was military war, was literal battle, easy to say that in the Greek. But notice how he says it. He says, "It was granted to the one who sat on this horse to take peace from the earth." And when you read your way through the Bible, the word peace is rarely, I would say, used for military action. It's usually used in a different way. Let me just give you a couple of those. Isaiah 26, verse 3. In fact, this one's really meaningful to me because my parents had this on a plaque that was hanging on the wall when I was a small child. Isaiah 26, verse 3. It says, "The steadfast mind of mine thou wilt keep in perfect peace, because he trusts in thee." So peace is the outcome of trust in God. And then you look at the opposite in Isaiah 57 and verse 20. It says, "But the wicked are like a tossing sea, for it cannot be quiet. Its waters toss up refuse and mud. There is no peace, says my God, for the wicked." All right? So peace in Scripture tends to be gospel peace. And the absence of peace, when peace is taken away, it's when the gospel is either no longer available or has been rejected, so that people are stuck living without it. So when you go through this thing, you've got the second creature has like a calf, you have language of sacrifice, you have the sword of sacrifice, you have peace being taken away. Jesus saying, "I didn't come to bring peace but a sword," but he clearly wasn't talking military. He was there, that's spiritual. So the spiritual nature of this language, you know, why would he choose that if his mission was to talk about war and battle? It just seems to me compelling that this text is talking about the consequences of rejecting the gospel.
So I don't think I've ever had an opinion about these 4 horsemen, whether they've been positive or negative, good, evil, whatever. I've always just been like, well, there it is, you know?
There it is.
And I think what's interesting to me is the more I hear both of you guys talk, is like, I don't think I still have a definitive answer, but I think I kind of like the concept that the first 2 are actually the gospel message, because if they're both going out and it's the splitting, you know, like the division of people's decisions and all of that stuff, I mean, that is parallel to so much of what we believe in, because I know, again, when I was a clinical chaplain, one of the things I noticed the most was that our message was a message that God sought us out. And so there is this piece with people where God came to seek us out and was giving us the option in our present lives, where a lot of the other belief systems, you had to do all this stuff in order to even reach the presence of God, or even, and a lot of it had to be done in specific ways. It wasn't like a conversation you could just have in any spot and location. So I remember setting up hospital rooms, like trying to bring in as many candles and weird seashells and like whatever they needed for their like ritual, whereas for me, you know, it could just be me in a room with a person. And so I find it interesting, like this act of seeking, and then this parallel. And so I don't know, I just have never thought of that before, and I had never really seen that in that text. So I think that's kind of a beautiful piece of it that I had never thought through.
Well, and the book begins. This is the revelation of Jesus Christ. And one of the compelling things for me here is you have the parallel with Matthew 24. But the one thing in Matthew 24 that's missing is the gospel. If you don't find the gospel in these horses, it's not here.
Yeah.
You have the wrath of the Lamb at the end, but if the rider on the white horse isn't the gospel, where is it? And I've always felt that if you work really hard at interpreting Revelation and don't end up with a clearer picture of Jesus, you probably haven't understood the book. That's my conviction. There's so much evidence that the book is Christ-centered, is gospel-oriented, and all of that.
So just to summarize now, so you would say that the first horse is the gospel giving people peace, and the second horse is when people reject it, they lose peace.
You said it better than I did, so that's exactly where I was going. And I'd have one more text, if you can just hold that thought.
Yeah.
In Revelation itself, I see I caught you at a very special moment. I don't want to lose that.
He's still like
But Revelation, keep that going. Yeah. Revelation 16:2. It says, the first angel went and poured out his bowl into the earth. It became a loathsome and malignant sore upon men who had the mark of the beast and worshipped his image. Let's see. Now, it wasn't exactly what I was. Oh, I'm sorry. It's John 16:2. That's my.
same thing.
Boy, I'm really off today.
It's okay. We all need more sleep, right?
Yeah. John 16:2. This is the one, yeah. Revelation 16 is related to John 16, but that was part of my confusion. But verse 2, they will make you outcasts from the synagogue, but an hour is coming for everyone who kills you to think that he's offering service to God. And the Greek word there is latreion, which means sacrificial service to God. In other words, the martyrdom of the saints is seen as a sacrifice to God. We're doing this for you, God. And that's the picture I see here in this second horse. To one sense, it's the civil war that comes when some accept the gospel and some reject it, when father and son are divided, when husband and wife are divided by the gospel. But in a second sense, there's persecution language here, that people who think that they're serving God are killing people in the name of God, and we know there are such people in the world today. Anyway, sorry, Dan.
And don't people do that in the church all the time? They think that they're defending truth and standing for standards and upholding the history of the church, and they're fighting against God.
Yeah.
You know? And Jesus says that to Paul. You're fighting against me when he catches him on the road to Damascus. We are, how did this time go? I think something is wrong with the clock in here.
You still got that point, though. Can you say it in 10
Yes, I
seconds?
will hold on a week. I will hold on to it for a week.
Okay.
It had to do with the idea of did they have peace? Peace. They had it and it was taken away. That's what I wanted to discuss.
Okay, got it.
Anyway, please, thank you for being with us. And this is just the fun of this. As we get into the text, we begin to go all over the Bible, and we're never quite done. So come back to us next week, GPS, and we'll go on to the next one.